Hey everyone, Margarita here. I'm going to film this video a little bit different than the way I do the rest of them. I don't normally have a sheet of paper I'm going off of or a bullet point list. I'm usually just winging it and freestyling the actual events that have occurred in my real life and are still ongoing. So this one, I want very specific information to be in. So I did kind of write about a couple page summary on what I'm going to be talking about, so I can kind of keep it all in order. It makes more sense if I say it all in order. There's just so much. It's hard for anybody to follow along. So that's why I'm going to be looking off a little and kind of reading a little bit more into this. And I'm going to start with the beginning, and I'm doing this for a reason. So there's more to this. This is just the first video on this, but I want this one to come out first. So I'm going to start with the beginning, when all of this started, around the time I was about 3, 4, 5 years old, when my mother began controlling the false narrative about me. And it started around the time I had confronted her about poisoning the batches of food as well. So that played a role as well. And then she grew the false narrative about me over time, and told people I'm known to lie a lot. And she did that just in case I ever tried to tell anybody about her poisoning food, that they would never believe me. And then at the same time, what she was doing with my dad is, because he was at work all day long, and then we'd be at dinner, and she would even repeat these delusions in front of me for some time, at certain times, depending on the age I was. But she would repeat the delusions about me right in front of me to my dad and tell him I did all these things that I didn't even do. While he was at work, or the preschool teacher told her this, or my first grade teacher told her this, or whatever. And he started believing these delusions and getting brainwashed with them over the course of time as well. And then as I got a little older and I started my first business, which was a babysitting service in the subdivision I lived in, I passed out flyers to all these homes, and we got so many calls between my friends and I ran it. I took a significant amount of the jobs, and so did several of my friends. There was enough to work for several of us. So when that started happening, I started spending a little bit more time away, and I started working in restaurants at age 14. So from there, that's kind of when I started eating my own food. Because I worked in the restaurant industry, there was always food available. And that's about how I started to not eat the food that my mother was making, and any amounts that may be poisoned in it. So I was ingesting very little bits around that time. I'd significantly been able to remove quite a bit of it by working in restaurants. And then I'd buy lunch at school because I also had a job. So now this went on. Now I'd be gone more, and then my parents would be having dinner alone. And my mother would still repeat these delusions over the course of time, even when I was a teenager, and all the way till I moved out when I was 18. Knowing I needed to move out at age 10, and I had to figure out how I was going to get out of there. And that's why I started working so young and figuring out how to make money so young. And if you just look at my reality and what I've been through, and my different videos, and the tour of my home, and all these other things, if you just add it up, you'll figure out real quick that I was never on drugs or had a mental disorder. I was literally high on money from going to work all those years, because I knew it was going to provide a safe home and a safe environment for myself. And even then, she was still in the background disrupting that once I did achieve that. And that's still going on today. But I was literally just chasing the bag all those years, numerous streams of income. That's what I was high on, nothing else other than the weed I smoke. And then I eventually became a legit medical marijuana patient once I became injured. So, the proof is in the pudding on everything I'm talking about. And it didn't really dawn on me. I was just in so much mental distress, and I wasn't allowed to grow into the person. I wasn't allowed to grow into my own person. She wanted to control everything, control what I did, who I talked to, where I went. So when I'd go to work, I'd be allowed to go to work. I'd be allowed to read books. So I grew into myself while going to work, and that's where I slowly became myself. And then I'd remove myself and have to go into the narcissistically abused child once I returned home. and kind of control myself to a certain degree. But because I grew up that way, I couldn't always control it because she was such an extreme narcissist, and the abuse was so extensive, along with the Munchausen by proxy. But there was nothing I could do about it. So I ended up getting myself out of there at 18. But shortly before that, around the time of my grandmother's passing in 1999, I was about 15. That's when she began to start painting me as a mental disordered drug addict and a liar. And she kind of grew that false narrative from there, which is still going on today with all of these people. And she did similar things with my paternal grandmother as well. Like I mentioned in that video, I made it a few days ago. So, you can view that video as well, and it'll make a little bit more sense, because my grandmother was her primary target for some time. And then toward the end there, it overlapped. I mean, several of us were her target, but then I became her primary target once my grandmother was gone. So that's kind of how that happened. And then, she controlled this false narrative and wanted the local police to believe I was on drugs and I'm this problem child. So they were successfully able to work together to get me put in a mental hospital, which only worked for about a week. It was all false information that she was feeding them. All it was is I was being extremely narcissistically abused. At no time was I ever on drugs or doing this and that she was saying. But because I was already gainfully employed, I had started the process to become emancipated. And then my dad got wind from this mental hospital that it only worked for about a week. She had me in Wyandotte Mental Hospital up, I believe it was like the 10th floor. And I said, no, I want to start the process on being emancipated because I already knew I could like provide for myself. And that started. And then when my dad got wind of that, he came in there and he got me out because he's like, no, that's not happening. Because he knew that I was going to cut him too and run, and that was going to be it. So he stopped that due to me beginning the emancipation process. And that's how intelligent I've always been. I've always been that intelligent. I am that intelligent. That's what everybody's got me painted as this whole other idea in their head, and whatever they've been told, none of that's ever been real. I've always been that intelligent. So at the same time, she got this psychiatrist. She had gotten involved to diagnose me with depression, which was actually extreme narcissistic abuse, and the way she would control me and make sure I was not telling people anything that was really going on, or her poisoning the food, or how she was acting toward me. Because she did not act this way toward others, she was able to control this. That means she belongs in prison because she's always been able to control her behavior. And no one was aware that that's how she acted toward me when there wasn't anybody else around. There's a couple people who may have seen it over the course of some years when we were younger. And I do believe I can get in contact with those people today who could still verify that today. So I was not depressed and needed medication or had a mental disorder. What you saw me acting like that's the result of me being extremely narcissistically abused and threatened all of the time. Just nobody else knew it, because then she put on her mask anytime she's in public or anybody else is around, and she's seems like a sweet, nice person, and all these people buy it. And it's still going on today. All these people buy this bullshit, this whole bullshit personality. It's not real. It's never been real. So even at home behind closed doors, if my dad was present, she wouldn't do that in front of my dad. She'd make sure he was outside or in a room where he wouldn't be able to hear. And she would start gaslighting me to the point where I'd stand up for myself and it would turn into a screaming match. And then she'd get him on her side, and make it look like I had a mental disorder or a mental breakdown. And when at no time that's not what that was. She was bullying me and narcissistically abusing me and gaslighting me, and I was standing up for myself is what that was. And I didn't have any other siblings. I didn't have siblings or grandparents to turn to or close family members to turn to. I didn't have anybody to turn to for help. So that's what it appeared to, and that's how she was able to manipulate my dad into she used him as a front, and, he's like one of the supporting flying monkeys kind of in a sense, because how she was manipulating the situation and portraying it to make it look a certain way from his point of view. So that was part of the problem. And then she got this psychiatrist to give me this prescription for these depression pills. Celexa is what it was called. And I only took them like 2 or 3 times. Mind you, she withheld the bottle from me and kept it and would put one on my dresser every day. But after those couple times of taking, I knew I wasn't supposed to be taking them. I didn't take them. But the problem was she would go through my room daily, every day. I had no privacy ever in my entire life until I got my own home. And even then, she was using agencies to harass me then. Even then, made her way into my home numerous times. Had convinced my dad to give her the keys to my home while I wasn't home. And she even then went through my home as an adult a couple of times. And that's exactly why she's not allowed in my home, because it happened with my first and second homes as well. But she had gotten them to give me these pills, and I had to take them with me and put them in my purse and carry them with me because of the way she went through all of my stuff all of the time. So at one point, there were so many of them, because this went on for a few months. There were so many of them. I needed to put them in something. And I was looking for bags. So I just needed a bag to put them in. And at this time, selling weed like gram bags and 20 sacks was pretty popular at that time in the high schools. And so people had bags like that floating around, not like sandwich bags. So I did grab a few of those from someone, and that's where I just shoved a whole bunch in these bags, just so they weren't just floating around my purse. And because she had controlled the flow of information, I was completely unaware that was even illegal to not have the bottle with me or the script with me, or that it was illegal to give them away, because I didn't sell them. I actually gave a bag of them to my friend who really was going through some stuff, and she really was depressed. And the way they had all been given to me in the process and how it all happened, why would I think that that's illegal? Especially when she controls the flow of information and how they were easily given to me and they should have never been given to me. So I guess at some point, it wasn't right. It wasn't right away. It was a few weeks later. My friend had them still, and there was a girl asking for any type of pill at school. Didn't matter what it was. She wanted to take it, and I guess my friend gave her a few. I don't know how many she gave her, but this girl had a reaction to them, but she knew they originated from me. So she told the ambulance people that they came from me, who then went back to the principal, and then they called me to the office, and then they start searching my purse and my locker, and in my purse, they find those couple bags that I still had of the pills I was not taking. Then now I'm charged with a felony and kicked out of school. And my friend was also, she did state my friend gave them to her. So we were both kicked out of school the rest of the year. And at that time, I already had my job that I stayed at for almost 5 years. So that friend actually came and started working with me at my job as well during that time, because we didn't have anything better to do. We could work full time if we weren't in school. So we just started working full time. And then at that point, I didn't want to be at home ever. So I wasn't allowed to do anything or go anywhere. So I don't care if I work 50, 60 hours a week, as long as I wasn't at home with her, that's all that mattered to me. And that's actually when I met my daughter's dad. So my youngest kid, and then my daughter's almost 20. That's when I met him, because he also worked there. And so he's seen like some of this, and I do believe that's when we started working similar shifts after I'd gotten kicked out of school. He was going home after the midnight shift because it was a 24-hour restaurant, and I was coming in, and there was no business, and we would just sit there for hours. And that's how like we met each other all those years ago. And I believe he was 17 or I was 17, he was 18, something like that. So yeah, that's like how all that even came about. But then not only were we kicked out of school, we were taken to the police station, and we were told we were supposed to be released to our parents. And my mom and dad both came separate vehicles. My friend did go home with her mom. No charges were ever filed. It went correctly for her. I even verified this with her not that long ago. But my mother stayed behind, and I went with my dad, and it took her an extra half hour or so to get home, and the drive was 5 minutes away. It's because she had gotten the school cop, to put charges on me, felony charges for having these pills that should have never been given to me in the first place. If anybody should have been charged, it should have been her and the psychiatrist who prescribed them. So right then and there, we got another problem, and she manipulated the entire thing. And not only that, but I didn't even know the charges were put on me for about another 6 months. I'm out driving around, get picked up on this warrant that I don't even know what I had. I didn't even know what a warrant was. I was still 17. And You know, they kept asking me why I didn't take care of a warrant. I'm like, well, how would one get a warrant? And how would I take care of it if I don't know about it? The other thing is my mother controls the flow of information, so it very well could have came in the mail, but she controls all that. So she would have taken it, ripped it up, threw it away, made sure I never seen it, so there'd be a warrant and I'd eventually be in more trouble and get arrested. Or she just told them to put the warrant out or whatever, and maybe there never was a paper, knowing I'd eventually be picked up and arrested. So she controlled all of that, and I got forced to do all this. I had to pay all this money. My dad didn't even know. She did this all behind his back. He had to take time off work, come to court with me. All these things came out of it, all the stuff I had to do on top of everything else. I was already working full time. So there was all these issues that came out of it that she created. It was completely, it happened all behind my dad's back. He had no clue that she had controlled all of that and caused all of it to happen. So, you know, that's another thing. Now, let's see. So I already knew, you know, known for some years, I was going to cut ties right at 18. Like I said, I've been working at the same job for a couple years at that point. Got my first home and bought my first home. It was a brand new mobile home, brand new. I'm the one who picked out all the details and everything. I did have to use my dad's name on part of it. My name was on it too. But the way and I picked the lot that it was on. It was a nice corner lot. Like it had a good amount of privacy and it was out in the country. So I felt fairly safe out there initially until I realized CPS was repeatedly harassing me, which began right away. The first incident began right away. But I paid all of the bills. Every check came from my personal checking account alone. That's it. Nobody else's ever. And I ended up owning the home for 6.5 years. Lived in it for 4.5 years. And I'll get more into like why I left in a minute, but, so I'd cut all ties with all of her family members as well. I didn't know who to trust, who to believe. I cut ties with her and all of them. And then that's how she made the false narrative continue to prevail in the background about me, who I am as a person, all of these things. Had no clue because I had no contact with any of these people that no one even realized I cut ties with her. And then my life is totally separate. I'm out here paying my own bills. Went to Dorsey Business School, graduated from that, went a whole year. Didn't really sleep. I had a newborn who was screaming at the top of his lungs 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a night for the first year of his life. While all that was going on, I was barely sleeping at all. And then I was still working 4 shifts a week, paying all my bills. So it was a lot on my plate. I was in all this distress, you know, until it started to kind of calm down. And then around age 1.5, I started working more and it started making way more money. But then, she also continued that false narrative and began that, you know, right when I had that baby, and I don't know if anybody realized I bought my first home. I moved in while I was in labor. So at no time was I living at their house. I don't know if she began it right away or how long it took before this false narrative became an effect that she had custody of and raised my older son. And then along came my daughter 3 years later, or when exactly that narrative fell into place, because they'd always lived with me. I've always had custody of them. I always raised them. Not only that, I had several teams of sitters, over the years. It wasn't just my parents had them every time I've worked all these years. No, they had them for certain periods. It was my dad doing the majority of the work. It would be for periods of time from time to time. It was never like 100% that way. There was like whole 6 month or year periods where they wouldn't even go over there regularly like that. So, and again, I'd work when they were sleeping. So they were only awake a couple hours. They'd be going to bed and I'd just wake them up at night and bring them home. So whatever story she told people, I don't know. I don't know exactly when that false narrative fell into place. And that plays a role in things because now she needs to prove to everybody she has custody of my kids. I'm this broke, drug addict, mental disordered, hot mess, liar, running off the streets, probably live in a cardboard box somewhere. I don't know exactly what she was telling people, but it was something along those lines, but needed people to believe that she had custody of and raised them for numerous reasons. And I'll get to that in the future, one of the next couple of videos that I do. I just want to get to the bottom line of all this, and then I'll get more into why all this is the case in the next video. Now, then, because we kept a separate relationship with my dad, she was over here presenting them in public, like showing them off at family functions and events. And she was doing this behind my dad's back as well. He had no clue. He was just picking up his grandkids to go to wherever they were going. And he had no clue. She's in the background telling all these people stuff that was never even real, that they had custody and raised them. And so silently she's presenting them, and they're there together. And all these people believe it because that's what they'd been told in advance. And because they see them there, that's what they still continued to believe all those years it went on. And we started figuring this out around 2013 or so, that's what had been going on. So it went on a good 10 years before we had realized. And that's when we started implementing more rules and standards. Like, you're not going with them. No, you're not overparenting me. No, that's not what's going on, which kept happening. And then my mother would put my dad up to come over and try to overparent me some more. None of which should have ever been allowed to happen. Now, there's been numerous times where she used my kids' dads and several attorneys to file false front of the court paperwork to get custody of them, promising they wouldn't have to pay child support if they would just bring her my children. She did that with both of my older kids, because both of those cases were in two different counties. One was in Wayne County, one was in Monroe County. So two different attorneys, two different counties. But she did it with both of those kids and attempted to get them to, sign off or go against me in court, get custody, and then just bring them to her. So that's happened twice with my daughter and once with my older son. And she believed that CPS would just bring her my kids as well. So after my second one was born, so this was 2005, and because now CPS has come numerous times because she's calling, and there's other incidences that are happening, but because of that initial incident where I didn't know my rights and they wanted family information, even though I knew there was something wrong with her, I still gave them her phone number, like not really understanding it all. That information was solidly put in that record. So anytime there was a subsequent incident, they would go back to those records and call her again, where she'd fill them up full of delusions and tell them all this false stuff about me that was never real. And then they believed her that I was on drugs, I'm this and that, I got this mental disorder. And she just believed that she was going to be able to get them to just bring that they were just going to bring them straight to her just because she said so. And she got the one lady, I believe it was the third time there was a CPS visit. So this is my second child. She was a month old when this happened. Me and her dad went to court together. We rode in the same car. And then they had manipulated the situation between whatever my mother told this lady. And I had an attorney there with me. They actually separated us in the courtroom, and they pulled him on CPS's side of the courtroom and me on the other side with my attorney. And there was no argument between us. There was no problem. She had manipulated the entire thing to happen, and all on these delusions. And at this time, I had owned my home for 3 years, paid all my own bills. We are not even together. He has his own place somewhere else. There was no child support in the system at this time. I did get fired for being pregnant with her at 8 months pregnant, but I'd always been gainfully employed, and I'd always kept my bills paid ahead 3 months in advance from the time I bought my first home, because I knew that I could only count on myself and I couldn't count on anybody else. So I'd always been that way. And I remained keeping it that way in case there was ever any emergency. And then I'd always save my tax returns as savings. And I did that my entire life from a very young age. So this whole thing, she gets it to go to court in 2005. And then the way the judge could see the manipulation and how we had rode together. And she was promising this CPS lady was promising that she was going to take my kids. Based on whatever delusions my mother had told her. And the judge could see something wasn't right, especially because he started questioning my employment history, how long I'd been working, how long I've owned the home, and how I pay my bills, and nothing added. And I didn't ever get assistance. I think gotten a bridge card for a short period of time, like a month prior to that. It did not last very long. Didn't even have Medicaid or any of that. So it did not add up to the judge, everything that was being said and the lifestyle that I'd provided. So he saw right through it and dismissed the case. Then the CPS lady, her name's Courtney Villarreal. She was out of the Monroe County CPS agency at the time. She had cornered me after this court date alone in the hallway and said, if I ever come back to your house again, I promise you I'm leaving with your children. So then she did eventually come back again. So this is about 4.5 years into me owning the home. That's when I knew, like, we're in danger, we have to leave. And by then, I had, like, leveled up so many times at a couple different restaurants where I was making so much money that I basically turned around and bought a whole other house back in Wayne County, quite a ways away. Left that house there, ended up renting it out for 2 years. And I'll get to that in a minute, because the bank messed up the payments on it. But I knew I was in danger. As soon as that happened, I closed up all the windows. And as soon as she came, I just acted like we weren't home. And then started packing stuff and took off. And then got myself moved into my next home about a month later. And just stayed other places for a bit. Because I knew that, like, that's what it was being led to them. And my mother, you could clearly tell my mother believed that this woman was just going to bring her my children. And I actually have a recording right here. I'm going to play it for you, that you can tell that that's what she had believed. And this recording is from 2020. So that incident where it went to court was in 2005. But I'm going to play this recording from 2020. And you can tell by the way she's talking, she truly believes the CPS workers are just going to bring her my children on whatever delusions she has told them. So I'm going to hit play so you can hear it. Okay, hold on. Let's see here. Okay, so here we go. Narc brainwashing, part 5.
And she goes along with it. Just like when she listened to your dad. Oh, it had to be your mom because nobody would know all that information but your mother. And she listened to him instead of thinking with her brain and using her common sense. Why would I oversell and spend thousands of dollars on your kid's teeth and then turn around and turn it into social services? The other thing, after an experience like her, nothing goes like
CPS wouldn't bring us to you. CPS wouldn't bring us to you. No, they take us away. No, they take us away.
My friend has a daughter
that's
a social
not the
worker.
same.
Your mom's just giving you shit. Let me tell you.
No, that's what happens. That's what happens.
You know what?
That happens to people.
If they have to put kids in foster care, the state has to pay those people to be foster care parents. So the first thing
every CPS worker, they make $4,000 off of a kid. You know that?
So you can clearly tell her behavior is not that of a neurotypical person, and she clearly believed that CPS was just going to bring her my kids, which is why all these repeated harassment and CPS visits and all the harassment it was ongoing basically pretty much up until like 2021-ish when it finally dissipated. And then I had that incident when I lived in Ohio 2 years ago, which they never made contact with me. By then, they weren't going to. Now, if you heard her say something about open her wallet, paying for my kids' braces, no. So my ex's insurance, we're all on his employer's insurance. Each person is eligible to have braces once per lifetime, and they pay half for each person that wants to do it. And then you just find, because each orthodontist costs a little bit different. And then depends on your income or how you make your money or your job. Sometimes they run credit checks, sometimes they don't. They'll let you make payments over the course of I believe it's like 18 or 24 months or something, which is what we had done. And I had put down a significant down payment because on my daughter, she needed braces more than my son, even though she was 3 years younger. Her teeth were much worse and I knew she needed them. And I didn't think I was going to live. This was about a couple weeks after my brain had swelled and broken through, and I died for 4 hours and came back, and I truly didn't think I was going to survive. So I got this appointment. I got the braces on her teeth, and I put a significant net. So now the insurance is going to cover half. I put I believe it was $1,200 or $1,500 down, and then I had monthly payments of about $100 it was a short period of time. And then my condition worsened because I still had not received treatment within the medical system. So now this is 7-8 months down the line. And I'm losing more functioning. I'm getting more unwell. And at this point, I know if we don't receive treatment soon that I'm not going to live. And so I wasn't able to produce as much income. I had to spend a significant time off work earlier that year. And then I did try to work a little bit, even though I had no time should I've ever been driving I wasn't driving there at the time, somebody else was, but I wasn't able to really stand very long or barely do what I was doing. And I got the money. I got enough to keep things going. But it was getting to the point where I was so unwell and getting worse and worse with no treatment that I knew I wasn't going to live. So I tried to drop everything down to the bare minimum. And at this point, the amount that was left owed on her braces was like $800 or $900. So that full cost of the braces being like $6,000, my mother had spent about $800 trying to act like she'd paid for them all. And then just to gain control and praise from other people, she offered to put braces on my older son's teeth. And at that point he was like 17, I believe. 17 or 18. And he still needed to be told to brush his teeth because of the high functioning autism. This is before I put him through the treatment and things had begun to clear and he started to function more better. It created a problem because he was not properly brushing his teeth as he should have. And his teeth came out worse. It would have been better off if they didn't put them on. But she wanted to pay for them. And I almost said no, because I know, when narcissists do things that there's strings attached. And, we ended up going through with it. Again, the insurance paid for half. She's wanting them on his teeth. And I'm thinking like, that's not a good idea. And then he got manipulated by his paternal grandmother at that time. Oh, he's an adult. No, he can do whatever he wants. He's an adult. No. And then she manipulated him over and took over him to move in with her because she saw what a hard worker I was, what I've taught my kids to do, and that's what he was doing. He was starting to do. She wanted him for herself to take care of herself, which is still currently kind of going on to some degree. But the braces were still on his teeth and he still needed to be told to brush his teeth, which is why I tried to get a partial guardianship going for him. And they weren't understanding the seriousness of the situation. And due to those braces still being on the teeth, he now has a big black spot on one of his front teeth. And I'm trying to get him into the dentist. I don't know if he's going to go or not or whatever, because he's an adult. I'm not supposed to tell my kids to do anything because right when you turn 18, that's it. You just cut it all off. That's it. So these people, each person has their own agenda. There's a lot of jealousy and envy coming toward me at many different angles. And that's part of the problem. It's coming from numerous angles. So that is an issue because that should not have ever happened. And both of those manipulative grandmothers played a role in why that is the case. So I am trying to get that taken care of currently, or at least get him to get that taken care of because he is still on our insurance. They're all those. There's 4 adult kids on there and the one younger one who's about to be 9, plus me and plus my ex. We are all on there. It doesn't cost anything extra beyond having 2 people on there. It costs the same amount and they have the insurance till then. So they're all going to stay on it and he needs to get it taken care of immediately. So that she did pay the other remaining half. But it was to gain praise and to prove to people she had custody and raised my older 2 kids. At this time, he was already 18, 19 maybe when he got the braces off. And then to get the braces off, you have to sign a form. And only me or my ex could have signed it because the insurance is in his name, or me as the adult on there is his guardian or is his mother. Whatever. Or him, it couldn't have been him because it had to be approved by the person whose name the insurance is in or the mother. Well, my mother had been calling the orthodontics in the background for about 2 years at this point, 2.5, 3 years, because their braces overlapped. They didn't have them at the same time exactly. They did for a little while. But she gained control over the false narrative and would call that lady who worked at the desk at Finazzo Orthodontics in Southgate, Michigan, and get her to believe that my mother had always had custody of and raised my kids and I have a mental disorder and a drug problem. And because I was fighting for my life and in an extreme state of brain swelling and suffocation and having to make all these phone calls trying to get treatment, there was all this yelling and these negative phone conversations and all these people working against me, yelling at me on the phone while I'd be in the waiting room trying to take care of business. It looked that way. And then she's calling in the background, gaining this control, this false narrative with this lady at the office, and then sending the monthly payments for only my son, basically only my son's, which was, I guess it was maybe $3,000 total that she would have spent. And it was probably I don't even think it was that much. I think they gave a discount for that second kid. So it was only maybe $2,200 or so they gave it for him, that she would have paid, and our insurance paid the rest. But she did that to help prove and back up her story to everybody. and everybody had believed, and helped believe the false narrative. And then when it came time to sign the paper to get him off, I was like, no, you have to bring that to me, and I need to see your teeth. And instead, she manipulated my son, because now he's an adult and he's getting them off. Still my mother signed off on the paper, and my son went in there anyway, but I was still receiving the text for the appointments. So I showed up at the appointment, and there became a whole screaming match, because this lady now believes I'm a mental disorder drug addict. Not that I've fought for my life, spent over 100 grand on treatment, keeping me and my younger one alive. She's threatening to call the police. She gets this woman to call the police on me for, I'm not the one that committed any crime here. I'll tell you that. It's these guys her and my mother committed the crime, and my mother's nowhere in the vicinity. She does it all from behind the scenes. But gets everybody yelling at each other. And I said, I'm going to need a copy of that paper. Right now, I want a copy of that paper. And I demanded it, and she's going to give it to me right now. And she did. I have a copy of it. Her signature on my son's braces, signing off as if she's the guardian. And she's going, oh, no, she paid for it. I said, no, bitch. I paid for those benefits with my life. My ex was able to take that job with those good benefits because of what I've provided and what I've built to the day that he took that job. That's how he was allowed to take that job. That's why we're all on those benefits that I worked for. So no, she did not pay for them. So she believed all these illusions. They end up calling 911. My younger one and I had to book it out of there quickly. I'm always having to run from the cops. It's an ongoing problem, still going on today. Just had to mention that because that's all kind of included in there. Now I'm looking like this video is probably going to be an hour. I really didn't want it to be, but there's a lot of very imperative information because I'm going to come out with a really big plot twist in the next video. So I just want all of this to kind of be in this video. Now, let's see here. Okay, so the front of the court. Oh, okay. The other thing is, I believe, due to the amount of incidences that have occurred with this department or this agency or this company or the police or wherever, I do believe my mother may possibly have some false documentation. Either she was able to get some type of court date somehow and get some witnesses somehow to have this court date behind my back that I'm a mental disorder, drug addict, loser, nowhere in the picture, and like deem me mentally incompetent on paper. Or she was able to take that false paperwork from when I was 16 and that psychiatrist wrote all that bullshit about me being depressed or whatever the situation, whatever was written. Either way, she either used somebody to write some false paperwork or she used that lady's paperwork with somebody else to write this false paperwork. Because now remember, she works in the medical system. And my one uncle, my dad's brother, is a psychologist. So he could very well be involved in the mix. Or she took it to court and had staged all these incidences with my kids along the way, proving she's got custody by just making them appear. And these people backed it up in a court date where then a court had put on some paper that I have this mental disorder or whatever. I do believe it's possible that there's paperwork that exists that may say something along those lines, just due to all of the occurrences and situations that have occurred, because it's been over 20 times now, probably closer to 50, that have all occurred. And these agencies are able to kind of spit out something along those lines, which they would have no reason to believe that because that was never true. So I do believe she could have some false paperwork that states that and use others to help her get that. And if she does, then all those people need to serve prison time if I'm correct about that. And I'll get that into my next video because there's a lot more to this. Now, I do have Charmaine, who works for me. I hired her a little over 5 years ago, and it's due to my mother's ongoing crimes. At this point, I was aware she was committing all these very serious crimes using all these large agencies. And it was ongoing very heavily at the time when I was still fighting for my life. So I'm the one who brought her in. I hired her because of the crimes my mother was committing, and I needed somebody to see it before their own eyes, and I knew she would start to call her at some point and tell her all this stuff about me. And I needed somebody to start documenting all of it because she began calling her regularly, as I knew she would. So she'd basically be calling her and telling on herself, because by this time, Charmaine already knows who the problem is, and she's just basically calling her and telling on herself, and Charmaine's documenting it. But so she is the only mental health professional involved, and that is due to the fact of my mother's crimes and her disorders, which I was initially going to get diagnosed, but then we realized shortly after Charmaine became involved, my mother's a little more dangerous than I initially thought. We're going to have to take a different route. Let me keep getting you the information, keep watching this play out, and we'll go from there. So that is why she's involved, not anything to do to me having a mental disorder. And it was also due to my injury and me being so close to death. So, and what their all actions were at that time toward me during that, which my mother was controlling as well. So that is the only reason there is a mental health professional involved. And I do believe she tells people that this woman is involved because I have this long-term mental disorder, and that's just what she tells people, and that she's in control of my care. I do have reason because of the phone call I received after my dad's injury, or he received it. She just didn't know I was standing there helping him use the phone, and I just didn't say anything. But you could tell by what was said that she and a text from her sister the following day. You can tell that they believe this woman's involved, and that my mother's involved in controlling my mental health care. When that's not at all what's going on. She was brought in to specifically document the crimes of all of these people and all these agencies and people she's manipulating. And she's watched a lot of this play out directly in front of her face. There's all these incidences along the way. I've brought some of the incidences right to her office to prove what's going on. So she very well sees 100% clear of every little situation along the way, all this time, and still going on today. Now, there is numerous police reports. Like I said, I've done a lot of FOIA requesting on documents so I could put the entire case together. And it states that I'm known to have a mental disorder. That's another reason I believe she has this false paperwork. And there's also numerous police reports where it states that I've threatened one or both of my parents with a gun that I own. I do own a gun. Why would I not own a gun at this point? It's my right as an American citizen, first of all. And my life is in danger, and it has been many different sets of times over the course of all of this. So she's got things twisted. It's your right to own a gun as an American citizen. She doesn't, obviously not neurotypical, but there are reports, I have them in print, that's coming from her as the caller, stating that I have a gun. She's in fear for her life. I have a mental disorder and a gun. So those are more false reports. And then the police show up operating on them as well. And then the police, as I'm making reports, sometimes they're omitting the entire video and the entire report. As I'm FOIA requesting these documents, there's things that are missing, especially within Brownstown, Michigan Police Department. And then she's made people believe over the course of all these years, and in all the homes I've owned, that other people have been paying my bills. And then she made people believe I could no longer afford to live in the home that I currently live in, which is why I had to buy a trailer in Ohio and move there. Nothing about reality on how she had inserted herself in the 2021 Ford gas leak and into the city and the mayor and the police and all that. Called to the top of Ford, made sure they believed I had this mental disorder, which that's another reason I believe she may have some paperwork, some false paperwork stating I have this mental disorder, and then told them I was never injured in the first place. That's another reason I did the video on my actual medical documentation and went public to the world with it all. Now that's what happened. It had to do directly with the gas leak and them not cleaning it up for us to even be in the home, and we were still so close to death. That's why we had to leave, and that's why I had to put a tenant in the home for a year. So none of that was real, and nobody was ever paying my bills in the first place. And she's always made people believe I'm on a very low level in life, financially and mentally. Okay, so then during my dad's injury, when that all began, yes, I was staying at my home in Ohio. And my problem was driving up I-75 where the water is. So where my dad was staying and where my house was located, I was not driving up that way. I was way farther west. So I wasn't driving through those gas particles the way I was getting to him, from the route I was taking. So I was going directly to my dad almost every night. Some of the times we're directly from Ohio. Sometimes I slept on my friend's couch and didn't go home for days. And then sometimes I would go back to Ohio, but I would still get there and back. Now, she made others believe that she had been taking care of him all that time, those first 15 months where I was there almost every night. She made others believe I was never there, nowhere to be seen, off in Ohio somewhere, doing whatever with whoever. And really, here I was every night there with him, and wanted to take credit for all that work that I was doing to make herself look like such a great person. And due to, it mixed in with the delusion of how I couldn't afford my house and here I had to go live in some trailer in Ohio. No, that was due to her crimes and the crimes of these agencies she's using, and the collusion and the corruption. So, no, at no time was that the case. I still was making it to my dad every time, almost every night, during all of that. So that was another thing with me living in my house in Ohio. Yeah. So, and another thing would have been me doing all that work that I was doing with my dad and all that care I was providing for him and being there all those long periods of time in the evening. That would expose some of her lies about where I've been all this time, what I've been doing with my life. It would have exposed those lies as well. So she had to make sure that that was another reason she had to get me banned, because I was a threat to her previous lies and delusions. And then she'd got me banned after I caught her having a false power of attorney that she had done, and a false quitclaim deed. And then she stole my dad's 401k 10 days after she had tried to finish him off at the Beaumont Wayne Hospital on 1/8/24. And then she had moved it all into a trust for herself, the house and the 401k. And he had no knowledge of any of it. And she had no knowledge that he had told me about their fight. You know, it was 2 days before, I believe it was 2 days before she tried to finish him off. He told me everything. She didn't know any of that. So she did all of those things. And I didn't find out she had a false power of attorney and a false quitclaim deed that was signed until I got the real one signed in April of 2024. So that was also the month she was heavily poisoning him, heavily trying to finish him off. And once I got those documents signed, it enabled me to figure out what was going on, when exactly the 401k was cashed out, when exactly her paperwork was signed. And now I do have proof, because I made a pre-police report in advance that we'd been talking about power of attorney from the time of his injury. I have the documents. He's just not well enough to sign them. It was dated a couple days before her power of attorney was signed. And then I have video footage of him, numerous videos, a few days after it was signed, showing, because I stated in the police report he's not well enough to sign it. And then you got the videos a couple days after, and it shows he's not well enough to sign it. So you can tell that she had manipulated the situation, slipped these extra documents in. And I do believe she used my dad's brother, Vince Camarda, and Terry Knorr is from North Star something. It's the lady who is in charge of his care for the workers' comp injury. I do believe those are her two witnesses on those false documents that were signed. And because they're such high-end professionals, they have all these fancy letters after their name, that they are to be believed as extremely credible witnesses when here they helped commit the crimes and the manipulation and helped her steal his assets behind his back. And then when I got my real power of attorney signed in April, that's when I'd figured all that out. So I have all the proof, and then the Romulus police doesn't want to look into it or believe anything I'm saying, even though I said I have all the proof. I've done all the homework. I have everything. I can prove it. And here they are still trying to charge me with fraud, like I did something wrong. But she used that incident to help ban me from the facility as well, and because I was trying to tell on her heavily in April 24 that she was poisoning the food almost every night at that point, and I had ingested it twice in that month. So it all kind of ties together in how I was banned, and it's all on her crimes and delusions, and gaining the whole support of the entire specialty spinal care facility to jump on board with all these lies and painting me as with a false narrative and this person she's described that I am. It's all connected. She used all of that as a whole, all those incidences, and then used it to get me banned and Adult Protective Services as well. And then she was able to manipulate Adult Protective Services as well. And there was many other incidences where they were called and by Beaumont Wayne. That's why she had to get rid of him going to Beaumont Wayne, and why she tried to finish him off there too. So she had to get him out of there because they were catching on to what I was saying down in the ICU unit. Now, the APS, so numerous, the first, I'd say like 4 or 6 visits or so that they did come out, they never once talked to me. And it's because they believed her that I had this mental disorder and drug problem, which she probably, like, again, it ties in with her possibly having false documents stating that. Because they wouldn't contact me. I tried to contact them numerous times on this ongoing case. And why are you not talking to me? I'm their only child. I've been the one here taking care of my dad all this time. Why would you not be talking to the one child that they have who's been a successful adult on their own for decades? That makes no sense. But she was able to manipulate that lady to lie in court as well. So I'll get to that in a different video. Now, another thing here that happened behind my dad's back, I did find in the records that there was a home that was left to my mother and her 3 siblings in the 1970s, and she was already married to my dad, and her sister was already married to her husband. So I do believe neither one of them ever lived in it, and I know the youngest brother lived with my mom's sister because she was the oldest, and the brother just a little bit younger than my dad. I don't know if he ever lived in it or if any of them ever lived in it at all, or if it just got sold and they split it 4 ways. But my dad was completely unaware that this home was ever left, that a portion of it was left to her. He was unaware of the entire thing as well. So she does a lot of these things behind his back, and he has no clue. She's hired numerous people to insert themselves into my life to get info on me and then relay it back to her. And then she tells them a false narrative about me in which they all operate on. And then the goal is to either to get me to do things that would get me locked up long-term in jail, or, you know, possibly to get close enough to me to like maybe marry me and then paint me as mentally disordered, to gain more control over the false narrative and then have it so I can't make my own decisions and use, you know, I do believe that it's those two, or it could be to you know, kill me. I guess it could be. I'm not really sure. I do believe it's the first two at the very least. And then I do want to mention there is at least 15 to 20 or more direct individuals involved in all of these crimes and the collusion and the corruption and the RICO crimes and everything that's gone on all these decades, especially more heavily, more recently, but over 20 years for sure. And then there is at least 10 large agencies and organizations involved as well. So I'll get into all those in different videos. And then the other thing is she had claimed my daughter on her taxes this year. And all of my kids have always been my dependents on my taxes all of their lives. And my older one, he's been providing, enough income for himself for some years now. So he's, you know, not on my taxes anymore. But my younger one and my daughter have always been on my taxes their entire lives. Nobody's ever claimed my kids but me. And I do believe there's a reason behind why she had to put my daughter on her taxes, and I'll get more of that on the next video. I did end up being able to get the money for it. However, I had to mail my taxes in and put an explanation. And then I had to put that it's actually tied to some other crimes that are going on, and they were not trying to look into it, but they did release the money to me. But she does have the documents the original documents that were done by whatever facility did their taxes, because I'd always done them all these years. She would still have the paperwork that was printed out because she did hers first that would show it on there. So she could have already maliciously used those for what I think may be going on here with that. And I'll get into that in the next video. But I do believe that that's why that happened. And no one ever knew anything about my life because I've always kept it private, and I'm all separate from all these people, completely separate. Never been on social media or flaunting anything I have, or even pictures of myself. I only recently, last year, less than a year ago, put the first picture of me on Facebook with a cousin. And that was the very first time I'd ever been on Facebook. I have a picture on me on there. And I did not use, when I got my Facebook, it was for business matters, but I had to create a personal. And I used it to carry out this agenda that I'm carrying out right now. I had this plan 6 years in advance. So that is why I had it and why I friended all her friends and family back then, because I already knew I was going to come out and do this when I could get to a point when I could deliver the information and deliver sentences out of my mouth properly. So everything had always been kept private. No one knew anything about me. I had no contact with any of these people. In the meantime, she's still controlling the false narrative and growing it even further. And now I have the YouTube series where I'm releasing everything. And now you see me and I am talking on these videos. Until recently, it's because I started releasing 2 months ago. Until then, there was nothing about me on any social media anywhere, nothing about my life, my lifestyle, or pictures of me or my children. There's maybe a couple pictures of my kids, but that's it. There's no pictures of me or anything real about my life or what I have or what I've built or what's been going on. Other than a few of the brain injury posts that I've made and such. Let's see. Now, these criminal actions, they're criminal actions. There's collusion, RICO, ongoing harassment of all these people and agencies. It's cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 20 years total. Just from having to leave the homes that I've owned and rented, and the chaos and the chase, always chasing me around town and living all this chaos, missed work numerous times. I've started numerous businesses. That business gets to a certain degree of success fairly quickly, and then she uses it, and then she wipes me out, uses these agencies to wipe me out, while here I am trying to run another business on top of still running my main form of self-employment, and it would wipe my businesses out as well. So it's cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably close to $500,000 to $1 million, over the course of the last little over 20 years now. I know she's told people that my dad paid my bills at my first house and he bought that house for me. No, he didn't. His name is on it with mine. And I paid every bill, every payment for that house I paid. And I had all of those canceled checks. I had them for years. And that's what I used to purchase my second home. I showed them all the canceled checks that they all came from my direct single personal account. Nobody had ever paid them. My dad had never paid them. None of that was ever real. And then the second house I moved to, I was forced away from my first house due to the CPS, due to Courtney Villarreal pulling me aside in the courtroom a few years prior, telling me she's going to take my kids if she comes back, which she then did. And then basically I got forced from that home. I was no longer safe in my home. I wasn't safe at any time. Here I thought I was initially, thought I was getting away, thought I was going to be safe. And she had even made some snood remark at some point, laughing like a deranged lunatic in high hysterics. Oh, ha, 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 ha. Every time I said how successful I am or I'm good on my own, like, what are you talking about, lady? And that's how she would respond. So she used that lady to force me from that first house, which then I had all my receipts and all my canceled checks. That's how I got the second house. And I should have never been forced from the first house. I should have been able to keep building and building and building. But due to the high interest rate I had at the time I bought it, and it was shortly before the 2008 crash, it caused, a lot of people lost their homes due to that, but it played a role. That played a role in my mother's crime. So I should have never been put in that house to abruptly move from my other house to do that. I did own both houses for about 2 years at the same time. And the dad of my 9-year-old and my almost 20-year-old, him and his cousin lived in it for those 2 years and paid the bills there. But then I received a certified package in the mail at some point that had stated, oops, the bank messed up 5 years into me owning it. And they miscalculated all this stuff. And they wanted me to pay them like $12,000 or something to call it even to where it should be at that time period. And by this time, my dad was getting ready to file bankruptcy, and I do believe it had something to do with like the vacations he was taking my mom on. I'm not really sure what it had to do with in total, but he was already getting ready to file bankruptcy, and we kind of had a sit-down meeting, and I said, you guys can either catch up the payment with that $12,000 if you can get it, or the payment is going to be significantly higher. And then I told him what the number would be. And between the two of them, they couldn't come up with that. And they just said, no, we'll walk away from it. And I'm like, that's fine. He's already going to file bankruptcy. Well, that's fine. I own another home. I'm already living in my second home. So that's what we ended up doing. And I know she told people that I lost that house to drugs. That was never real. Or my second house to drugs. That was never real. The first one I was chased by CPS. Second, she told people I lost to drugs. None of that was ever real. It had to do with the 2008 crash. And then, so the banks were ripping people off heavily at that time. And I had such a high interest rate. They didn't want to lower my interest rate. They said I didn't make enough money on paper to lower my interest rate. And I said, that's funny. Then how am I making enough now to pay what the payment is now, when my payment should be about a quarter of what you're charging me? That makes no sense. So the whole banking system was fraudulent around the time that all happened. And I did end up walking away from the house because the banks were ripping me off and refusing to put a reasonable interest rate on the home where it should have been in order to keep the house. And so I ended up just walking away from it. And I said, because the amount of money I was making at the time, because like I said, numerous streams of income. I was working for Applebee's and I was still self-employed. So I was making really good money, working quite a bit. And and the way I calculated it, I'm thinking like, well, I can just work. And the support system I had, the way I had the other people watching my kids, it was not my parents, but they did go there from time to time. And they would watch them a little bit. But again, I work at night where they'd be sleeping, or some of my shifts at Applebee's would be while my children were at school. And then I'd leave and I'd pick them up. They were driven to school all those years until I had my last baby. So those two older ones, I drove them every day and picked them up every day. Or my dad would pick them up if I was still stuck at work at Applebee's, because he was on his way home crossing through the area anyway. My mother never did any of that. So the way I configured it is like, well, with how much I make, like in a year, I'm making, and how everything crashed, I said, I'll have enough to buy a whole other house with cash in a year. I'd be totally paid for. And which is what I began to do. So then I'd stacked my money. I got ready to buy, I was going to buy, there was like 3 or 4 really solid properties I almost went with. And then I almost bought the condo in Florida. And then here my mother was getting real jealous. And I do believe she was calling that one manager at Applebee's, conniving with her, trying to get her to dislike me. And they were both jealous of me, and the way I look and what they look like. And, you know, and here I am, and I'm self-employed as well, making all types of money, making more than she was, making more than the both of them. So they got really jealous, and I believe that she set me up to get fired from Applebee's. But it didn't matter because my self-employment's 100% in my control. I'm still making the same amount of money regardless. And I was working less actually by the time, and I was still making the same. I never worked for anybody else after that until I did that temporary little stint of employment while I was pregnant and then got permanently injured. So that all kind of went on. And then my mother began telling people, once I got the home I'm in now, my third house, that my ex, his job got it, and he pays all the bills, and I'm just this mentally disordered drug addict who doesn't work. And then, because he had been gone for some time, then she started telling people, maybe she told people my dad paid my bills for a little while, but she told people I couldn't afford it, and then that's how I ended up in Ohio in a trailer. Not because she had caused all these problems using these large agencies to chase me from my home where it was life or death to us, and we're on the floor living with our brains bleeding. So she told all these people these delusions. Obviously, I'm back in my home for a reason, because it was only temporary up front. I knew up front the lady would only be in my home for 2 years tops. It ended up being a year and a half, but 2 years tops, and it was known in advance because I knew I could tell about how long it would take for the particles to dissipate from the spill. And no, it was all set in advance. All my business plans are all set years in advance. And so she had pulled that off. Yeah, I've been back in my home for 14 months because this is my home. This is where I'm supposed to be. I've had the home 8 years. I should have never been forced away in the first place. These are crimes. On all these companies, agencies, my mother at the root. Okay, so then I'll get into my numerous streams of income and how I make my money and how I've made my money in the past and what's all been going on all these years. I'll get into that because there's numerous things. And I'll get into that in its own episode. I've worked for everything that I have. No one has ever helped me. My mother and the agency she uses to chase me and harass me along with her escapades she goes on has caused me to walk away from 2 of these homes. And then 2 that I rented. She used CPS to chase me from 2 that I rented as well. And then forced me from my current home for that period of time as well. That's all due to her. And then the $100,000 in damage that was done to this home, that was also due to her, because those tenants should have never been put in my home. I should have never been forced from my home. Ford should have been forced to clean up the gas bill properly for us to stay in the home. Again, I do believe there's some false documentation that she may have showed them that I have a mental disorder and or a drug problem. Which is not real. If she is producing that to people or ever showed anybody that, it is not real. I promise you that. And after I walked away from my second home, when I realized I'd make enough money, and if I could just, continue to work the way I do, I'd have enough to pay cash for another home, and no big deal. What I ended up doing was filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy and just starting all over from scratch. And I didn't even use any banking systems or credit or anything for like 4 years. I went strictly cash for like 4 years. I had nothing but cash. Tons of it. Stacking and building. That's all I did. High as shit off cash. That's it. No drugs, just the weed and the cash. All green, all natural. So yeah, that was a complete wipeout. So I left my first home, had to start all over, and that happened. And then had to walk away from the second home, had to file Chapter 13 bankruptcy, had to start all over. Then she went on an escapade in 2013. I'll get to that in its own episode. Had to start all over from there. She'd wiped out all that cash that I'd stacked. And that's how I ended up with my daughter's dad, and that's how we ended up with the now 9-year-old that we have and the extra kid that we have, because of that escapade in 2013. So I'll get all to that in its own episode as well. Now, let's see. Oh, yeah. So then with the damage to the home, my current home, and what had all occurred with all that damage, the girl here refused to leave, and then she was getting the mail here where the insurance checks were sent, and she threw them away and then refused to leave and wasn't paying anything. So what ended up happening was, and I had 2 additional brain injuries shortly before that as well, and one of those times I did die for 15 minutes and come back. No treatment, again, in the medical system due to my mother's ongoing crimes and the crimes about my hospital. All of this, all tied together. So after she threw away those checks and I couldn't get them reissued in time, in a timely manner to have them in my possession, it caused me to have to file Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which I am currently under and have been for about a year and a half now. Which the payments are being maintained, whatever. You know, there's some shifts and changes going on with my income, but still I'm 100% self-employed. So it is what it is. That's how I got in that predicament. Was each person and agency played a role and led to that, because the girl should have never been in the home in the first place, further to be damaged or for the insurance checks to be even sent or thrown away. And then trying to report the criminal negligence to the police department, and they're involved in the crimes and the harassment and all the false arrests and whatnot. He refused to take the report and then instead threatened to falsely arrest me. And he said he's coming, waiting to come back to my home to falsely arrest me again. So, you know, all of this occurred at the root. It's my mother. And then the triangulation, like I said, the pentagondulation, because it's numerous angles here, has led to the Chapter 13 bankruptcy. That's how I got to that degree today. But I have enough assets to back it all up. You know, I just need to make the payments and keep it all running. But I shouldn't be under Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And at no time should I've ever had to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy all those years ago, back 15 years ago. That should have never had to happen, because I never should have been forced from the first home either. Yeah, I should have just been able to build like normal people. That's what normal people do. It's not wipe out. That's what's been going on all these decades. It's still going on today. So, that's why she needs to be apprehended immediately. I can get way more into detail. I am going to come back and read in more depth on each city set of police reports that I do have, the ones that were not omitted, that I do have in my possession. I'm going to come back and release those as well. I just want to get this video out. And let everybody know the exact truth of what's been going on all this time and all these years and what I've really been doing. And then in one of the next videos that I'm going to come out with, I'm going to take it even further and throw in the plot twist and blow the lid off of it all, because all these people need to be exposed. There is way more serious crimes going on than what I have stated, and it needs to be stopped immediately. And I'm owed quite a bit of money. So I will get back with more of that, and I'll be back with another one. Thanks. Bye.